never enough. Who want it with us? We tough as elephant tusks, came from the mud. You want it, gotta take it in blood. All about a dollar, never claim to be thug, all we ask is trust.
Real ones know, Georgia Road Mo, aka OPM, the original Pretty Mo. Welcome back to the show. And while I'm at it, let's get right into this Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith 168-pound title fight that took place. Canelo pretty much dominated the fight, which was amazing to me because I'm looking at it like this guy's 6'3" tall, and you're going against a guy 5'8", and he wasn't really dominating the fight with that jab. He was using the jab, and he was backing up a lot. Felt like he could have did a lot more damage if he kept the fight in the middle of the ring. I know he was, trying to keep Canelo from getting to the body, but I felt like he could have did a lot more damage if he kept the fight in the middle of the ring, kept that jab active, and controlled the distance a lot more with the jab, and coming over the top with the right hands, and get more jabs going to the body of Canelo. But it was a short notice fight for him. He had 4 weeks to prepare. I guess you got to take that fight. It's a money fight, so I guess you got to take the fight if you got one of the cash cows, especially in your particular division or around your division, saying, hey, I want to fight. So he had to take that fight. But Canelo pretty much dominated the fight, and they're acting like Canelo's like this monster, though. That's the thing that bothered me about it. But I have to give Canelo props because Canelo, I have a lot of criticism for Canelo, but Canelo will go up and fight guys. He will take on challenges. Canelo does have heart. Canelo will fight. I think Canelo will fight, any of the real tough fighters if it was up to him. I think he would, want to fight them, but his handlers have moved him around well. It's like exactly how Demetrius Andrade said at the end of the fight. They were doing an interview with him. He said they moved him around well, which they have. They've kept him away from Demetrius Andrade, from the Charlo brothers. They kept him away from those guys for a reason, because if we look at the fights where he fought guys that are similar to those fighters, like a Floyd, which Floyd is the way Floyd came. He came at Canelo. Pause. He brought the fight to Canelo and stayed in front of him and beat him like that. Landy Lara kind of outboxed him. I felt like Lara won that fight, but Lara outboxed him and moved around the ring. So Canelo doesn't do well with a lot of those guys that's not flat-footed, that won't stand in front of him. He took on Danny Jacobs, but Danny Jacobs is a bit flat-footed. He's a little bit older, and he's had a little bit more wear and tear than those other guys. And he took on Danny Jacobs. I thought that was a pretty close fight. I would have to watch it again to see if I felt like Canelo decisively won it. But Canelo will take on challenges. He said he wants to unify at 168. It's a couple of good fights at 168. And if he really does want to unify, this will be very interesting. Caleb Plant, he's a guy that moves around the ring, and he's a great boxer. And a younger guy, he has power, skills, and that would be a good fight. I think he was trying to set up that fight for this past weekend with Caleb Plant, but Caleb Plant said early in the year that he wasn't letting the guy get him on a short notice thing. It's going to be a even playing field. David Benavidez, a lot of power, bigger guy. I think David Benavidez and Caleb Plant, those two guys wouldn't have went in there and just backed up the whole fight and let a guy come take their belts. Those guys will fight him. Demetrius Andrade is at 168 now. If he can get his hands on the belt, we'll see if Canelo will be willing to make that fight. because those are guys that aren't going to just back up and let a guy punch on him and beat him. And I'm going to say this about Canelo. His last fight against Kovalev, he fought him on 1 month notice. And the knockout looked ridiculous. To be honest, I gotta be honest. The knockout looked crazy. Anybody who's got 2 eyes, you can look at that and see that kind of looked weird. The whole fight was just weird. He fought him on 1 month notice. The fight before that, Kovalev was almost knocked out by a guy, and the guy just gassed out. And Kovalev knocked the guy out with a jab, and that was because the guy was gassed. But he almost stopped Kovalev. He was really beating on Kovalev. And Kovalev came back maybe a month and a half and fought Canelo. This Callum Smith. He just fought John Ryder, which, once again, like I said in my last video, unbiased, true boxing fans felt like John Ryder took that fight. So Canelo's kind of getting guys off of bad performances, coming off their worst performance, or maybe coming off a bad performance that they got to win in, or arguably some of the guys' worst performance. That was Callum Smith's worst performance, and he picks guys at the right time, and he kind of beats a lot of guys that are over the hill or catches guys at the right time. And he's become the cash cow, so he could say, hey, I want to fight in a month, and the guys will jump on it. Now, one thing I would say, because I like to bring Floyd into it, because Floyd is the measuring stick of the last 20 years of a boxer, especially of a guy who's considered to be the cash cow. Floyd never fought guys on 1 month notice. He never gave guys 1 month notice. We know about 3 or 4. The fans would even know about 3 months before the fight, 3 or 4 months. So the fighter knew and was training, and they came in on an even level playing field. And a lot of people don't like to point that out when they talk about Floyd. They like to criticize him. And Floyd, another thing Floyd never did was take guys coming off their worst fights. If we go back and look at just the second half of Floyd's career when he came back. When he came back, he fought Marquez. Marquez had called him out, and it was a comeback fight. He hadn't fought in 2 years, so, somewhat of a tune-up. But he came in and fought him. He fought Shane coming off of Shane's best win in years, winning the title. They said Shane was the man at welterweight 147. He fought Shane. Floyd had an injury, so he took a year and a half off. He ended up fighting Victor Ortiz. Victor Ortiz had beat Andre Berto, and they said that was his best fight of his career, the biggest win of his career. He looked good. He beat Berto, who likes to use the shoulder roll. So a lot of times what was going on, guys that fought similar to Floyd, if they lost to a guy, they would say, hey, he could fight Floyd next. So Floyd took on Victor Ortiz. Before Floyd went to prison, he fought Miguel Cotto. Cotto coming off his biggest win. He got vengeance against Margarito for the glove incident, for the raps. He took on Cotto. When he came out, he fought Robert Guerrero, who had just beat Andre Berto, because Berto had started back winning. And once again, if a guy fights in that shoulder roll style and someone beats him, they felt like, hey, this guy could beat Floyd, and they made Guerrero the mandatory. So Floyd took him. Who else did he fight that year? I know he took on Maidana. No, that same year, 13, that's when he took on Canelo. They said, hey, Canelo was big. He can beat Floyd. He took him on and beat him. He fought Maidana. After Maidana beat Bronner. Once again, another guy they said was similar to Floyd, and he dominated Broner. That was the fight that people wanted. They made him the #1 contender. That was the fight that they wanted to see. He took him, beat him twice, and then he took Pacquiao. So when we're looking at it and trying to compare things, we got to be honest and say Floyd's blueprint. These guys aren't following Floyd's blueprint. They want to be the cash cow, but they aren't following the blueprint that Floyd set out to get there and to maintain the integrity of being the best fighter in the world. Now Canelo, I would say, if you got to look at resumes and accomplishments, he's probably clearly the #1 pound for pound fighter over Terrence Crawford. And I love Terrence Crawford. I think he's a great fighter, but he ain't fighting nobody. He hadn't fought anybody in the last 3 years. And if we're being honest, at 140 he cleaned up, but 140 was light. If we being honest. So we gotta look at it and say, hey, Terrence Crawford, we know he's a hell of a fighter, but what have you done over the last 3 years to prove that you're the best fighter in the world? Canelo, they moved him strategically, but the movements have been smart, and he's fought guys that you can't argue with, and that has his resume at top-notch level, probably the best resume in the sport right now. So with that being said, Canelo took the fight. He dominated Callum Smith. I think he won maybe 2 titles at 168 last night. Canelo's making this legacy. They moved him pretty well. He's done well in the sport of boxing. And one thing we can say about him, he has heart, and he's gonna fight anybody if he gets the chance to. And they move him strategically. His team moves him strategically. They keep him away from certain guys. But hopefully we can get a Charlo fight or Andre fight, since it's at 168. Hopefully we can get the Caleb Plant, the David Benavidez. There's some good fights at 168. Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, Demetrius Andre. Let's hope to get those fights. And I think that's about it for the video. Real ones know Georgia Romo. Like the video. Comment down below if you agree or disagree. Let's talk about it. Subscribe to the channel. And I'm out. Gone.
Is it me that they speak upon? Niggas wanna creep up on. Respect for me absent, won't hesitate to sleep me on my